I'm Kathleen Marshall.
And I'm Dick Scanlan. I'm the book writer of the new Unsinkable Molly Brown.
And I'm the director of the new version of the Unsinkable Molly Brown.
And choreographer when there is choreography
Eventually
to be
when
done.
there is choreography, yes. And this journey started for Dick how long ago now?
Well, in a sense, it started in 1993 when I began work on Thoroughly Modern Millie, which had been was a film originally written by a guy named Richard Morris. And Richard wrote the original book for the Unsinkable Molly Brown. While we were working on Millie, he would say to me, when we're done with Millie, we've got to fix Molly. And I wasn't, at that time, I was focused on the project at hand. You know, we got Millie up, Richard passed away, and over the years, his estate and the Wilson estate would talk to me about revising the Unsinkable Molly Brown. But what always stopped me is I would look at the script, and they would always refer to it as polishing the script. And of course, polishing implies that the problem is tarnish. And when I looked at it, I thought, it's not just tarnish. To me, there was something fundamental in the storytelling that needed to be re-examined. So I finally got the idea of starting over, basing it on the historical figure, who's quite different than the myth. And that really began in earnest about maybe a year and a half ago. And I approached Kathleen pretty early on in that process.
Yeah.
Atypically for me, I was struggling in the early days. There were just a lot of things I didn't know how to do it. And it just sort of came to me. It was like Kathleen Marshall should be the person to do this. Honestly, it was completely intuitive, and it was the right choice.
Well,
so.
Thank you. But Dick did a lot of research. He came to Denver, he came to Leadville several times, doing a lot of research about the truth of the real story of Molly Brown. And what's interesting is that he's in this new script been able to incorporate a lot more historical truths to her story, but it's still historical fiction in a way. He still has to sort of create, a dramatic story and a stage-worthy story that's not just a sort of dry biography,
right.
But doesn't have all the sort of falsehoods and exaggerations that both the original musical and the movie had.
Right, and one of the things that from the very beginning that I thought, well, if the title is The Unsinkable Molly Brown, then there have to be more challenges to her during her life besides the Titanic, because that comes at the end. And, as horrific as that was, I thought we needed to see her repeatedly face challenges and crises and forks in the road and have this sort of indomitable spirit, not always to her credit. I mean, at times her indomitability is a steamroller, it began to interest me because that's true of people in the world. The people in the world who are effective and make things happen are often people who roll over some other people's toes.
Right.
And then I very right on the heels of that sort of thought, I thought, well, this really should be the story of a marriage. This is a story of a relationship. And once I had that in place, then I thought, okay, well, now I know at least what I'm trying to build. And then the question became how to do that.
And one of the best things that happened along the way is that Dick was able to get permission from Meredith Willson's widow to sort of go into, what we call the trunk, to find some new songs or some new old songs to incorporate into the score. So there are some songs, seven new songs. Meredith Willson songs. Right. Some songs that were cut from other shows, cut from The Music Man, cut from Molly Brown, and other songs that were never published, other songs that were written for other purposes. But what's wonderful is they all sound like Meredith Wilson songs.
They really
all
do.
have that kind of wonderful sort of open Americana spirit to them that his music has, which is also complex. And for a lot of people who know and love The Music Man, they know that Meredith Willson is a genius at sort of going from spoken dialogue into song. That there's sort of rhythmic speaking that then turns into song. Think about Trouble in The Music Man. And there are several songs in Molly Brown that have that same kind of feel, that start with rhythmic dialogue and then eventually go into melody. And they're really wonderful.
It was pretty thrilling, I have to say, because it was a bit like gold mining, right?
Yeah.
Once we finally, got the permission from Mrs. Wilson to go in, and the great news was that Mrs. Wilson had been Meredith's secretary, and I gather she was as good a secretary as she was a wife, because when we got in there, everything was alphabetized and files, every draft of every song he had ever written. So it made the research from that perspective easy to do, but it was just hundreds of songs by this legend that, you know, many of which had never seen the light of day. And of course, we had no idea when we opened that file cabinet, would we find 3 songs? Would we find 300? Would we find 300 not good songs?
Right.
And what we found was, I mean, the new songs are really pretty delightful. And they, you know, one of my real hopes in this, I keep saying to Kathleen, everyone, the theme of this party is Meredith Willson.
Yeah.
You know, we're here to celebrate what a complicated and fundamentally American, he was a man who had tremendous joy and complexity in this, you know, uniquely American way. And the new songs, I think, really help us achieve that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if that house is red,